from the previous speaker.
To hear Nobert Friedman. He is 90 years young, and but he's like so bright and wonderful.
The man upstairs deserves the applause.
Survivor of the Holocaust, and it's an honor for us to hear his story, to welcome him. I wanted to let you.
I know we know the alphabet. We write from left to right. The Jews write from right to left, and therefore you might feel that I'm starting at the end instead of the beginning. The war was coming to an end, and because of the proximity of advancing American forces, the last concentration camp of Ganake was closed on April 23, 1945, and we were proceeding to an unknown location in what became a death march. After 3 days of trekking on foot, 2/3 of the convoy either died from exhaustion or were shot by the guards for not being able to keep up. Eventually, the SS commandant ordered the guards to individually take 6 to 8 prisoners each and to find shelter until the German army would defeat the enemy. 8 others and I, guarded by an SS man of Hungarian nationality, found shelter in the barn on the outskirts of the village of Herbertsfeld. In the morning of May 1st, we were awakened as usually by the crowing of the roosters. This day, however, the sound of the heavy guns was coming closer and closer. Suddenly the guns fell silent, and an ominous quiet fell over the area. We sat up, shook the straw out of our crumpled rags, and crawled toward the wall of the barn to look through the cracks. During the night, snow had fallen, and the ground was covered by a white blanket of flakes. The rising sun's rays brilliantly bounced off this virgin garment as if heralding a new day and a new era. The innocent snow, by covering the blood-soaked raiment of Cain, seemed able to proclaim a new beginning. Sometime later, we heard a strange rumbling. The barn actually shook, and we ran to the other side of it to peek through the boards. We saw an amazing sight. 3 large tanks slowly rolling toward the village. On the side of the tanks were 5 pointed stars, and soldiers marched behind them. Russians, Russians, we cried at first, misled by the 5 pointed stars. No, no, Amerikaner, the guard corrected us. We embraced, and knee-deep in hay, danced crazily. And then suddenly we stopped and looked at each other. Who were we? We were free, free. Free? Free at last? Free of that ever-present fear that we would not make it, that we would not know the end to this nightmare and would never live to tell others about it. There we stood motionless, haggard and dirty human scarecrows, draped with rags loosely hanging down from our shapeless, bony frames. In our numbness, we were unable to totally comprehend the enormity of the moment. The gates of the Gehenna had finally opened, and the caged beings were unable to leave. After a couple of hours, we could not wait any longer. We were free, and we wanted to know what it meant. After a huddle, I was chosen to go into the village to find out what the situation was. After all, I was the only one who knew the sound of English from watching all those American movies that I always bragged about. I don't know why my group expected that the few words of English I knew, I love you and goodbye, darling, would help me talk to American soldiers. I started out slowly, unaccustomed to walking without an SS guard. I kept glancing over my shoulder in fearful disbelief that I was free, dragging my swollen, lacerated legs. The village square was crowded with American soldiers in their vehicles. Some soldiers leaned against the trees, some against the buildings in the square. Others sat on their helmets, most of them chewing on some kind of food. My appearance did not go unnoticed. The reaction of the GIs at the sight of this emaciated 80-pound apparition, garbed and tattered striped concentration camp uniform, was one of embarrassed surprise. At once, they would stop eating and watch the silent, confused, severely pained image slowly traveling in circles, perplexed and dazed, trying to assess the setting around it. The silence in the square was broken when one of the soldiers called out to me in broken German from the GI manual, "Kommen Sie her." I approached him and told him in German that I was Polish. I was not yet sure that it was safe to admit being Jewish, although the badge under my serial number, the little red and yellow Star of David, should have given me away. A Polish-speaking sergeant approached and questioned me. Who was I? Where was I coming from? Upon hearing my story and relating it to others, he proceeded to comfort me and heaped upon me in merciful compassion all kinds of food. He and other soldiers loaded the C and K rations into my skinny arms, which tried but could not hold them. In terror, tears streaking down my face, I watched their precious expression of life-giving generosity fall to the ground, the cans clanking onto the cobblestones and rolling away. The soldiers got down on their knees, picked up the food, put it in the package, and handed it to me. It was that act of kindness, of gentle care and compassion from a military authority, so far the opposite from the behavior from those warriors I had lived under, those brutal products of a hateful totalitarian tyranny. That pure gesture of a helping hand and instinctive goodness made a powerful impact on my battered, worn-out, cynical shell. That warming sense of a man's comforting pity gave birth at that moment to a new expectation. I was flooded by hope, born of all the dreams I had dreamed during the nightmarish midnight of our Golgotha. A confluence of all my yearnings for a better, cleaner, undefiled world, a world free of the downtrodden and the victimized, of the brutal and the arrogant. For me, the sight of those imposing, stalwart, and yet benevolent liberators embodied the promise of justice forthcoming, justice for all the wrongs for which we have been the targets. In their gentle generosity, they represented the promise of a humane, healing providence, a promise they so nobly fulfilled. A couple of months later, the American officer in charge of the area, Major Jackson, assembled the survivors of the Death March for an ecumenical Thanksgiving service at the soccer field in town. After his address, he asked the representatives of the different faiths, the Roman Catholic, the Protestant, the Greek Orthodox, and Jewish, to offer brief prayers of thanksgiving. My father, who was chosen to represent the Jews, read the 116th Psalm that you have heard me recite. It has become the signature prayer for me. It was recited at my father's funeral, and since it is a part of the holiday liturgy of Thanksgiving, I always read it with special affinity.
Thank you.